Any category is limited. When most researchers start analyzing discourse or making observations and they have a rubric, they put things into categories. They put observations into categories. They put what they analyze in categories. There are tiny categories, like linguistics has very tiny categories, like the pronouns. So you have to say, when you note there is a pronoun, then you circle red. When you see a verb, you circle green, and you want to see the number of times people use the green with the red. That is a simple way of doing research. It's a form of study that is very reliable, but is not very meaningful. Reliability, robustness, having data that provide a lot of sharp evidence may not be meaningful, may not make meaning in terms of what we do out of it in education, while more fuzzy data, more complex, nuanced data, more flowing data, such as life narratives, maybe in a sense less robust, less rigorous, but much more meaningful to the readers. When you use categories, categories are always limited. They are never pure categories. They are never pure categories. For example, there are people who do content analysis. Each sentence that people say in their interviews, they will record and they will transcribe and they will try to see what's the content. And they may code the content. For example, I interview teachers on their planning. How do they plan their lessons? And then I let them speak. I let them speak a lot. Why? Because what differentiates a novice interviewer or researcher from an experienced interviewer? Novice interviewer asks one question. That's the transcription. Answer. And then new question. Transcribe. Answer. Then new question. Expert interviewer. One question. Answer. Then three dots. Break. Silence. The expert interviewer does not ask any more questions, and the interviewee takes advantage of the silence to retrieve more information and start to speak again, you know. I've seen transcription of experts interviewer in which they ask one or two questions at the beginning and the people answer for 45 minutes, for 50 minutes without interruption. Or when they stop, one tip of the expert interviewer is you take notes. Even if you don't need the notes, it helps you focus on what they say. So you take notes, then the person stops, you look very absorbed in your notes and you continue to note. And after 30 seconds, the person continues to speak. What does it help? It's the knowledge that when people stop, they retrieve more information. They pull new information in their memory and they continue answering. Now, what happens is after they answered spontaneously for 45, 15 minutes, of course, you code or you select some elements thematically and you describe the content. It doesn't change from the method when you ask the question, they have 2 lines to answer, question, 2 lines, question, 2 lines. But here it comes with a context. So it's much more rich in terms of interview. And then you select, and you select the content. For example, there are rules of decision, rules of thumb that you have to develop. Here, in one paragraph, the teacher explains how she is planning her classes, but she doesn't use the word planning. Do you code it as planning or not? you have to make a decision. There is no right decision. Every category is whatever you define. So you have to define if the form or the word planning is key to your code planning. This is important. After you did that content analysis, which is a qualitative process, you might want to make a statistics of those codes to see how many codes per teacher, male teacher, female teacher, per teacher in those schools or in that school. And so the qualitative background of your research helps for a quantitative study. Quantitative, qualitative are not exclusive, okay? They are not exclusive categories. They may be enmeshed, they may complement each other. Factorial analysis is quantitative, but you have a moment in which you see the graphic with the axis, and then you have to name the axis, and depending the naming, the meaning you take out of that factorial analysis, which is quantitative, is different. And how do you name the axis of a factorial analysis? You check the variables that are closest to the end of the axis, and they give meaning to the axis. What is it? It's a qualitative analysis. In the statistics, you cannot make sense of the statistics without a qualitative analysis. I would go so far as to tell you that quantitative research is a particular form of qualitative inquiry. Why? When you use numbers and statistics, you number something. And that something is a qualifier, is a quality of something else. Doing quantitative research is doing a specific type of qualitative research, which is quantifying quality. This battle between quantitative researchers, qualitative researchers has no ground, because we are all looking for meaning. There are types of research that are meaningful and types of research that are meaningless. How would you get to do research that are meaningless? Is because you do the research for some purpose else than the results of the research. For example, political purpose. Another example, getting a career. Imagine that we only give professor positions to people who did dummy research. Then you have to go through years of dummy research to become a professor, no? You seem to be very passive in what I'm telling you. I'm kind of sending you bombs here. It may sound like jokes, but this is not. In psychology, you might say psychologists are my enemies today, but I should tell you I have a PhD in educational psychology, so I'm not absolutely against psychologists. If there are psychologists listening to that, they shouldn't be shocked. Just using this example to highlight a process. There is a lack of replication studies. When you do something and you rediscover something in medicine, for example, oh, in medicine, I found that this medication, so medication to reduce blood pressure, gives side effects. Which side effects? People are coughing all the time. People have all kinds of problems. You do that research in Madison. Now you'd like to have somebody in Pennsylvania checking that it's the same there in Philadelphia, or checking in New York, or checking in Florida. In Miami, do people cough? In psychology, the same. You use some tests, and then I'm doing a stress inventory. What is stress? If you're a psychologist, you say, I don't know and I don't care. Stress is what is measured by my test. Why? Because stress is no other than what is measured by a test. So, by the way, if the test doesn't tap exactly on what people would interpret as stress, then it's not anymore a stress test, but it's called a stress inventory. There is somebody creating a test and inferring, that means inducting, that this test will measure stress, or say learning efficiency in education. The person creating the test infers that learning efficiency is measured by the test, by those so many questions. And what's the proof? The proof is when you do a questionnaire, doing a factorial analysis. What does a factorial analysis? It selects the different categories in the test to see whether there are some items that nobody answered and some items everybody answered the same. So the factorial analysis collapses the data to check which ones are not relevant and which ones are the most relevant. That has nothing to do with content, nothing to do with content. So people can claim, I followed the procedure and my test is scientific. Okay, it's scientific. Why? Because categories won't be redundant and won't be overlapping. However, what happens is the test is called scientific because it has been validated statistically as no overlap and categories are clear and distinct, and everybody feel from a Gaussian parametric perspective, it's okay. But there is no criticism on the content. When they want to criticize the content, they compare it to another test that is meant to measure the same thing. But since everybody is thinking in a box from their lit review, from their field of, epistemology, things repeat themselves all the time. And moreover, people feel so comfortable are repeating and repeating and repeating. Why? Because we need guidance.